Welcome back, IT pros. Okay, let's dive right into this. This is part 3 of our 10-part tutorial, IPv6 Transition, Scaling the Modern Global Network, an introduction for the IT professional. As always, this explainer is presented by Virtualization Options LLC, our Colorado-based technology research and education group. Assuming you've got the networking basics down and are gearing up to support your organization's migration from IPv4 to IPv6, you are in the exact right place. Let's look at exactly how we scale the modern global network. Here is a quick mental roadmap for this explainer. 1. The end of IPv4. 2. Essential IPv6 addresses. 3. Transition strategies. 4. The dual stack approach. 5. Translation and legacy support. And 6. Your migration action plan. Section 1. The end of IPv4 and the hard limits of old networks. You know, it's actually kind of incredible when you think about the journey of this protocol. RFC 791 defined IPv4 all the way back in 1981, and its design, honestly, brilliant in its simplicity. Packet-switched, connectionless, best effort delivery. But we have to remember it was designed for a really small academic research network, definitely not a commercial, planet-scale internet. By 2011, just 3 decades later, that modest research protocol had exploded into a network of billions of devices, and the global IPv4 address pool was completely mathematically depleted. Now, what's really interesting about this number, over 4 billion, is that it is a hard mathematical wall. The 32-bit addressing of IPv4 yields exactly 4,294,967,296 unique addresses. Back in 1981, that probably seemed infinite, right? But today, with smartphones, IoT devices, cloud infrastructure, it's entirely inadequate. We have permanently exhausted this space. So, you might be wondering, how on earth did the internet survive past 2011? Well, with a massive band-aid called Network Address Translation, or NAT. From the internet's perspective, NAT makes an entire office of, say, 500 people look like a single host. But as network engineers, we know the real cost here. NAT state tables eat up significant router memory and CPU. Worse, it completely violates the internet's original design principle of end-to-end connectivity, where every host is supposed to be reachable by every other host. Troubleshooting NAT traversal issues, especially for peer-to-peer apps and voice over IP, is arguably one of the biggest, most frustrating time sinks in modern networking. All right, Section 2, Essential IPv6 Addresses and Key Vocabulary. This quick visual cheat sheet highlights 3 compressed addresses you're going to see constantly in IPv6 documentation, socket APIs, and packet captures. Recognizing them instantly is a foundational skill. First up, you have : 1. That's your loopback address, literally the exact equivalent of 127.0.0.1 in IPv4. Next is : which is the unspecified address used before an IP is even assigned to a host. And finally, the mixed notation : FFFF followed by an IPv4 address. That's an IPv4 mapped IPv6 address used internally by dual stock operating systems. Section 3, Transition Strategies. Let's look at the 3 core approaches. Now, there isn't just a magic switch you can flip to turn on IPv6. There are 3 primary strategies. Dual stack means you're running both protocols simultaneously on every single device and link. Tunneling involves encapsulating your IPv6 traffic inside IPv4 packets just to get it across legacy infrastructure. And translation literally converts traffic between the protocols at a gateway when one side simply cannot support the other. The reality check for enterprise networks is this: don't expect a clean, single mechanism rollout. Most of you will absolutely use a mix of all 3 of these strategies at different points during your transition. Section 4, the dual stack approach, which is our preferred path. With dual stack, there's absolutely no translation needed. You get full native performance on both protocols. And the really great news here is that operating system support is already completely ubiquitous. Windows 10 and up, modern Linux kernels, macOS, iOS, Android, they are all dual stack by default out of the box. So your endpoints, they're almost certainly ready. Plus, when a client connects to a service, RFC 6724 governs that process, dictating that devices will naturally prefer IPv6 when both address families are available. So the crucial point is recognizing where the gap actually lies for most organizations. It's usually in the infrastructure configuration. To make dual stack a reality, network admins still need to manually configure IPv6 routing protocols, like OSPF-v3 or MPBGP, running alongside your existing IPv4 routing. You have to publish DNS with both traditional A records and the newer IPv6 Quad A records for all dual stack services. And critically important, you must apply equivalent explicit IPv6 aware firewall ACL policies to actually secure that new traffic.
Section 5, Translation and Legacy Support. Time to talk backwards compatibility.
Let's look at how we handle IPv6 only clients that are trying to reach legacy IPv4 servers. This requires a pair of tools working closely together, DNS64 and NAT64. When a client queries for an IPv6 Quad A record and none exists, the DNS64 resolver intercepts that failure. It essentially synthesizes a fake IPv6 address by embedding the real IPv4 address inside a specific NAT64 prefix. Once the client tries to route to that synthesized address, the NAT64 gateway steps in and handles the actual translation on the wire. They're a pair. Neither works without the other.
And this brilliantly illustrates 464XL8, which is just an elegant solution for legacy applications. Even on modern devices, thousands of legacy apps unfortunately still hard-code IPv4 addresses. 464XL8 solves this using two main components. The CLAT runs client-side right on the device, translating the app's hard-coded IPv4 traffic into IPv6 so it can seamlessly cross a pure IPv6 carrier network. Then the PLAT acts as the provider-side NAT64 gateway at the network edge, translating it right back to IPv4 to reach the legacy internet. The app thinks it's on an IPv4 network, the carrier gets to run a much simpler, cheaper, pure IPv6 internal network, and backward compatibility is fully maintained. Best of both worlds.
Finally, Section 6, your migration action plan. Let's get practical. Let's move to and see how this builds into a solid 3-step action plan you can kick off today to prevent future technical debt. Step 1. Contact your ISP to confirm your IPv6 prefix delegation. It is absolutely vital that you request a /48 for your organization. Whatever you do, do not accept a /60, or you'll severely limit your subnetting capability down the line. Step 2. Build your entire addressing plan, your sites, buildings, VLANs, completely on paper before you ever touch a router. Step 3. Train your network engineers on IPv6 addressing and dual-stack operations, and flag any legacy hardware for upgrade, way before making any production changes. I want to wrap up the structured portion of this explainer by emphasizing a core quote: IPv6 native infrastructure, where IPv4 is a compatibility layer, not the other way around. That is the ultimate architectural goal. Continuing to rely on highly complex NAT setups is just a dead end. Treating IPv6 as the primary default foundation is literally the only architecture that will scale, simplify, and secure your network for the next decade. The transition isn't just something coming in the distant future anymore. It's already happening right now. Major content delivery networks, massive cloud providers, cellular carriers, they are all predominantly IPv6 today. Every single year you delay your organization's transition is just another year of mounting technical debt. You've got the knowledge now, and you've got the structural playbook. So the next step is completely yours. Are you ready to clear that technical debt and truly modernize your network? Thanks so much for joining me for part 3 of this tutorial series, and I'll see you in the next one.